One of the hazards of reporting on a story not only in real time, but as it is unfolding, is that there are bound to be errors made. Unlike the types of people at the fake news mainstream media, we're not going to bury the correction near the want ads. That's not how we do things around here. We're going to make the correction and a clarification at the start before going into an update about the situation in Notre Dame as we understand it today. As these events continue to unfold, the facts on the ground will change. The correction is this. Yesterday, I shared a clip of a group of, shall we say, new Europeans chanting Allah Akbar while the cathedral burned. That turned out to be an edited clip done by some typically dishonest person and shared on social media as something real, and then, of course, it went viral. Call it a meme if you like, though in my experience, memes are meant to convey the truth with humor. That having been said, the clip may have been fake, but the message conveyed was not, because I pulled these images from various reputable sources on social media in real time as the cathedral fire story was unfolding, and I initially chose not to use them in the original story in lieu of using that video clip instead, which was my error. I've included them here as you can see, and it shows that what I was trying to convey in the original story was in fact true, even if that clip was not. Now for the clarification. The story of Macron wanting to rebuild Notre Dame in a new modern image comes from the official social media accounts of something called French 24 News. They've since deleted the original tweet and Facebook posts because they got ratioed. If you're not familiar with that term, it's basically what happens when you send out a tweet or some other social media post, and the angry replies and dislikes greatly outweigh the likes and positive comments. Those posts got ratioed, and it happened pretty quickly, so that French media account deleted those tweets and posts. So I stand by that statement. It came from an official French media source close to the Macron government. You can see the Facebook post on your screen. Anyway, on with today's update on the Notre Dame situation. In 2018, there were more than 1,000 church vandalisms and desecrations across France. In March, Saint Sulpice in Paris was set on fire after a midday mass. Quoting an article from CBN, quote, "In February, at Saint Alain Cathedral in Laval, congregants found their altar cloth burned and the church's crosses and statues of saints broken. And in the city of Nimes, individuals vandalized the church of Notre Dame des Enfants, Our Lady of the Children, and smeared a cross with human excrement, which is according to Newsweek." End quote. In another incident, on the 4th of February, a statue of the Virgin Mary was found smashed on the ground at St. Nicholas Catholic Church in Hules-Yvelines. And yes, I know I'm butchering all these French names and I don't care that much. Just days later, the Eucharist was scattered and the altar cloth soiled at the Church of Notre Dame de Jean. In March of this year, there was a 7-day spree of vandalism that led to 10 Catholic churches being sacked, altars smashed, and other acts of deplorable vandalism. In the case of Notre Dame, while the official story remains that it was an accident, a bizarre claim that the state made while the fire was still burning, French reporters on social media reported that investigators were quietly looking into the possibility of sabotage. This is due to the contractors that were hired for the project being highly trained and certified specialists who, the day prior to the fire, had kept the electrical equipment and lines in keeping with French legal codes on historic buildings. In fact, all the electrical wiring had already apparently been removed. Electrical lines were kept largely outside the building, along the external walls, covered and not near flammable wood or materials. Equipment was kept secure. Yet the investigators apparently have reason to believe it was tampered with. In total, the criminal investigation team of the Police Nationale will be interrogating more than 200 workers who worked at renovation sites of the cathedral. So while the official story remains that it was an accident caused by negligence, there is a criminal investigation being undertaken. Now, if it was purely an accident caused by negligence, why the use of criminal investigators? The argument could be that it's because of the unique nature of this accident and its high-profile nature that requires the best investigators possible. But then again, for those of us who don't buy the official narrative, there's another reason they might be bringing in criminal investigators, and it's summed up in this clip.
Toda la ínsula, varias personas y como decíamos están planteando evacuar toda la ínsula.
Interpret that image as you will. You already know what I think it is. Whoever he is, this was filmed when there wasn't supposed to be anyone on the cathedral. The fire started right after the cathedral closed for the day. Truly suspicious. Moving on, French news in a clip that will be found on the Sources blog, linked to the description, described the fire starting to smolder at about 5, but not really getting started until 7 p.m. local time. This is in keeping with one of the questions being openly asked by the public and by political leaders around the world. Specifically, why did it take hours for the fire response teams to arrive? Certainly, the cathedral had fire and smoke detection in the building. That could very well be a result of issues of competency among first responders, though I kind of doubt it. If tampering and sabotage was the cause, then it's safe to surmise that the sabotage included attacks on electronic surveillance equipment meant to warn the authorities of fire. But again, that's my speculation. I maintain what I said in my first video on Notre Dame, that it was arson. As such, the burning of the cathedral was not the first such attack. In August of last year, the holy water font at Notre Dame was poisoned. Yes, poisoned, in an act of desecration. Quoting an article from the UK Sun, which is definitely not my favorite source for information, for the record, but they're quoting a French-language mainstream news source, so it is what it is. Quote, "They complained of tingling in the face after signing themselves the holy water at the entrance of the church. Others claimed the water was giving off a foul smell. Suspecting sabotage, a priest reported the poisoning to police. Officers investigated but deemed there was no risk to the public. Cathedral officials discarded all holy water and scrubbed basins with bleach to make sure they had removed the threat." End quote. Locals blamed it on a schoolboy prank, but come on. Not a chance. In 2010, there was an Islamist terror plot to detonate a massive bomb in the cathedral, but that was foiled by anti-terror forces in France. This is, of course, only the tip of the iceberg. There had been numerous reports that Notre Dame had been the recipients of threats from the so-called New Europeans for years now. Initially, people speculated openly that ISIS was responsible for the fire, but they haven't claimed credit to my knowledge, and they've never been shy about taking credit for their evil work. In 2018, we know of, over 1,000 vandalisms and burnings of churches in France. That's an enormous number, averaging around 3 acts per day, or pretty close to it. Yet Notre Dame is the one that the authorities rushed to declare an accident before the fire was put out. I'm no expert in fire investigations, but I do know that investigations don't typically begin until the fire is put out and investigators arrive on scene. There are stories circulating in alternative media claiming that investigators were not permitted on site, that other crimes were found that point to arson and terrorism, but I wasn't able to find more credible sources on that. I remain skeptical about the official story because of the history of the French, the UK, and the Europeans in general doing mental gymnastics to avoid calling obvious terror attacks what they are. There are numerous stories of this, too many to recount here, but you can simply find stories online of obvious terror attacks being labeled as attacks by either so-called Asian men, or even describing them as locals who yell so-called religious slogans that are never identified, always with the declaration of motives unknown, unless the case is so overtly obvious that they can't lie about it. For example, if someone had parked a truck bomb, a la the Oklahoma City bombing, in front of Notre Dame and set it off, they couldn't lie about that. That's just one example, not to be ghoulish about this. The French and Europe in general are sitting on a powder keg of their own making. It looks to me like they took the story of the Tower of Babel as not a warning, but as a how-to guide for building a utopian society, and they are now reaping the rewards for their arrogance. This, along with their pagan religious zeal for diversity and open borders, has required that they say anything but the truth about these things. So yes, I remain skeptical, and I suggest you do as well. If you have a hard time believing what I'm saying, just do a little research on the European migrant crisis and do so away from the official narrative promoted about that in the media. So what does this bode for the immediate future of Notre Dame? Certainly, the cathedral will be rebuilt. The official fundraising has already begun. At the time of this report, there were hundreds of millions of euros donated to the cause from the hyper-rich of France, as well as hundreds of millions of dollars from the US and elsewhere. What the rebuilt cathedral will look like is anyone's guess. Dig the negative response to the France 24 story, get the attention of the Macron administration, and give them second thoughts about rebuilding the church in line with modern French values. Let's hope and pray that it is so. I do remain hopeful that, that politicians are susceptible to public pressure. But who knows? As a side note, Notre Dame is the property of the French state, as are most churches in that country. This is due to a law passed in 1905 with policy origins going back to the Masonic French Revolution in 1789. Finally, I'm going to leave you with this clip. It's a positive note because we are in Holy Week, and I do want us to turn, as we approach Easter, to things more holy. It's from the gathering of everyday French citizens gathered near the burning cathedral. They're singing, many with rosaries in hand.